Pressure posed by the U.S.-led European Missile Shield may force China to upgrade its nuclear arsenal. A senior Chinese military official's comments point to the possible threat of a new arms race. The country is already allocating billions toward its military budget at the expense of public spending. RT's Alexei Rashevsky reports.
Meters from Beijing's Forbidden City, the economic might of today's China is easy to see. But only a few kilometers from here, the picture is completely different.
In some ways, the modern-day China resembles the Soviet Union. Just like in the last days of the USSR, billions are being spent on military needs. And despite the seeming economic prosperity, the gap between the rich and the poor is simply striking.
In the last year alone, the number of poor in China has hit 250 million. But instead of addressing daunting poverty issues, Beijing is having to buy new weaponry and investing billions into producing its own.
You have a large arms budget. China's is now the second largest in the world at $106 billion. This is an enormous expenditure of wealth at a time when diverting that could make a real impact on poverty. And it's also happening at a time when there's an economic slowdown that is happening throughout Asia.
The same applies to India, which last year was the world's leading weapon importer, including an eye-watering $20 billion worth of French fighter jets. This is why Washington's return to Asia policy, from selling weapons to holding joint war games in the region, is deeply troubling countries here, especially China.
The U.S. wants full-spectrum dominance in the region, and it wants to project its military power to everyone concerned, especially China. I think the U.S. may not be headed for a direct military confrontation with China at the moment, but the U.S. wants to contain China, wants to encircle China and keep it subservient to U.S. dictates.
This situation draws historic parallels with the Cold War, say experts. Many still sure that the huge arms race in the 1960s between the United States and the USSR was Washington's tactic to sabotage the Soviet economy.
It became more of an economic race. By continuing the arms race, they weakened the economy of the Soviet Union. It's a stupid game, and it's been going on ever since the 1950s, yes, unfortunately. And you were the victims, and I think China will, to some extent, is a victim too.
Historians agree the collapse of the USSR was caused by many factors, and the gulf between rich and poor as the economy sank was just one of them. The question now is whether the Asian giants can continue growing their military muscle, but not at the expense of their people's welfare. Otherwise, there's serious risk of growing political and social instability. Alexei Rashevsky, RT, reporting from Beijing in China.